I ask that if it's comfortable for you, please insert your pronouns, or if you do not use pronouns, please disregard into your name slot on Zoom. So if you have questions or people are speaking to you or responding to you, that they know how to address you. So today's anti-Thanksgiving event is going to be a mourning event, and is going to celebrate the human and non-human individuals at the intersections of the harm that Thanksgiving and colonization perpetuates and normalizes. Today during this event, we are going to be leaning into fragility, and we ask that you take bio breaks and listen to your body throughout this event. There will be some trigger warnings. Those will be capitalism, fragility, as I mentioned, genocide, institutional violence, murder, racism, rape, slaughter, speciesism, white fragility, and also white supremacy. We have used all of the resources that we had available to us to make this event as accessible as possible. There are ASL interpreters that will be provided for this event. They are listed as such. If you need to switch your, if you need to switch your camera over to them, you can just look them up under the ASL interpreters. And we will also be having mental health professionals available to anyone who needs them throughout the event. Their names are Gabrielle Davis. They go by she, her pronouns. And she is at LPC and NCC. And also Andrea Pikes, who also uses she, her pronouns, who has a Bachelor's of Science degree and is a counseling intern. And they will be accessible throughout the event. If you need to speak on anything, if you have any crises, they are here for you. Message them privately through the chat, and they will be here for you to help you through the content. All right, so we are going to get started with our land acknowledgement. So I'm going to introduce Dre to do that at this time.
Wonderful. Pilama Yaye. Thank you so much, Kevin. Taya Yahi nan petu washte. Dre nan insitsin imachia pi. Nila wakate wakia ka. Leoteo apetu. Ilmakpi na leonpetu washtekte. Welcome and good day. My name is Dre and I use they, them, theirs pronouns. So to use my pronouns when addressing me, you could say, I listened to Dre when they spoke during their land acknowledgement today. I'm here to acknowledge who ancestrally, traditionally, still, and will continue to belong to the land we currently reside on. The land on which we collectively stand and operate from is part of the ancestral and occupied homeland and territory of the Shoshone-Bannock and Shoshone-Paiute peoples, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, as well as the Yakima Nation, who shared this land with all the human and non-human peoples indigenous to this valley. Borders are upheld by colonization and white supremacy, but within those colonial and arbitrary borders that contain the land we now refer to as Idaho, the Nimipu, Coeur d'Alene, and Kootenai peoples also have ancestral and traditional homelands and territories where they previously, currently, and will continue to care for the land. The peoples who belonged here, who shared this valley, have never relinquished their title to this land. The people of the Boise Valley lived and gathered collectively on this land long before a single white person looked out on this valley, and long before a single white person even saw the shores of Turtle Island, the land we now refer to as the United States. Indigenous peoples from the Boise Valley were forcefully and violently removed and relocated to present-day reservations. And unsurprisingly, the treaties that were made to grant them ancestral rights to the land were not honored by the whites. This was a common, a frequent, and typical decision made by white people as they perpetrated genocidal, exploitative, colonized, and militarized violence and harm to Indigenous people across Turtle Island. Instead of honoring the treaties made with the Boise Valley peoples and many other Indigenous peoples, they forced our ancestors into residential schools, cut our hair, and they poisoned our spirits. They made our ceremonies, languages, and traditions illegal and forcefully sterilized us so our ancestors could not share those illegal ceremonies and languages with us. They made our skin lighter, they made our hair thinner, and not because we consented to it. We lost language, family, and our identities. We continue to lose family, identity, and ceremony as we move away for school, for work, and for our chance at surviving within the oppressive institutions and genocidal governments that still want to put an end to their Indian problem. We lose language, family, identity, and ceremony when our siblings and our families are missing and murdered. We lose language, family, identity, and ceremony when Indigenous peoples do not have food or clean water. These acts and lasting effects of genocide were committed by the capitalistic and white supremacist settler colonial institution of the United States. They continue to commit genocide on this land through economic exclusion and deprivation, social exclusion, starvation, relocation, and blatant murderous, exploitative, exclusionary crimes. I could further address and recount the specifics of this violent history of these lands, but I instead encourage those who refer to themselves as allies to go beyond this space and educate themselves. It is important to understand the history that has brought you to reside on this land and to understand your complicity within these racist, genocidal, murderous, and colonial institutions. It is also important to reflect on how traumatizing it is for those of us who are Indigenous, those of us who do lead these acknowledgements, to frequently recount colonization and the resulting trauma our ancestors endured, as well as the trauma we continue to endure as their descendants. For organizers here, I ask that you always start events and discussions with a land acknowledgement. But as Charlie Marks has shared before, a land acknowledgement is performative by definition. Its power lies in the action it motivates. Before, during, and after every single acknowledgement, put action and intention behind your desire to decolonize. Learn what Indigenous organizations or businesses exist on these lands. If there are proceeds involved in your event, what portion of your proceeds are going to an Indigenous tribe or organization? If you're not an organizer in attendance, are you planning to conduct a land acknowledgement and gather reparations from friends and family during this week, this day of mourning, and distributing them to Indigenous communities and orgs on this occupied land? Go beyond the single land acknowledgement and every land acknowledgement and put action behind your intentions, and reflect on your complicity and role within colonialism and capitalism, because we do not want and we do not need any more performative allyship. While I am grateful to be here, I feel a deep ache whenever I stand before anyone, before any event, to acknowledge who belongs to the land we now refer to as the Boise Valley. This ache is rooted in the fact that these acknowledgements wouldn't even be necessary if colonization didn't exist, and also in the fact that I am a settler myself. I am a multiracial, Indigenous, two-spirit, queer, and trans non-binary person who benefits from colorism, from being able-bodied, English-speaking, and multiracial. I am Oglala Lakota. I am Salish. I am Lebanese and I am white. I have immense privilege in the settler colonial state, seeing as while my mother is Malakota, Salish, and Lebanese, my father is white, and my skin reflects him, as well as my eyes and my hair. And they reflect the genocide, the marginalization, and the rape committed by this government. My family and ancestors did not traditionally belong to the stolen land that we now refer to as Idaho. I was born and raised in the Boise Valley instead of our ancestral homelands. Instead of the reservation my ancestors were forced onto and where my mother grew up. And instead of the stolen lands my father now resides on. I am a stranger, a visitor, a settler to this valley, even as an Indigenous person. As a settler, I hold myself accountable for the harm I perpetrated to this valley and all the human and non-human individuals who belonged here long before I did. I perpetrated colonialism when I ran to the hills after school to trap ground squirrels, when my friends murdered deer and I skinned their bodies in my garage. I recognized the harm I caused, and I recognize the privilege I embody as this multiracial, urban space, Indigenous person who I am. I live as an intersectional anti-speciesist and anti-racist because I have this privilege and this ability. For those of us with disability and privilege, we must address how we contribute to the lasting and ongoing effects of human supremacy, white supremacy, and colonialism each time we sit down to eat, refer to others, and every other daily choice we have the very privilege of making. To address colonialism, to decolonize, is to be intersectional, anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, anti-racist, and anti-speciesist. To decolonize is to recognize that colonialism displaced, relocated, starved, and murdered the peoples indigenous to this land, depriving them of the traditional food sources and replacing them with government-appointed rations instead. To decolonize is to recognize our privilege regarding food access and recognize that we cannot move towards collective liberation without recognizing the non-human individuals on our plates and the lives they wanted to live just as badly as we do ours. To decolonize is to actively work to restore Indigenous food sovereignty by supporting tribes in preserving their land and traditions. To decolonize is to dismantle capitalistic systems and abolish settler, colonial, and racist institutions. Something I recently realized is that in my acknowledgements, I still strive to educate and create a learning environment, a space for the whites in attendance. I still try to grasp and claw at the hill they stand upon while the dirt drips as mud at my feet, cementing me to the valley below because that hill was never meant for me. A beloved community member and an elder of mine recently shared with me that we deserve to feed our souls. We deserve to create and take up space as the radiant, the transformative individuals we are. And with that, I must say to my beloved community of Black, Indigenous, queer, trans, unhoused, poor, incarcerated, non-human, and all those people within the beautiful and intersecting identities that have been marginalized. I love and I see you. For my Indigenous community, Nila washje tilake, Namishnala Wayaka Nishnala this day, this week of mourning, and every single day and week before and following today. We do not need to climb that hill of theirs. They made and climbed that hill with tools we will never have access to, and frankly, I don't care to have them. Because we have a valley of trees and rivers. We have a community and we have each other. And we are abundant as we are. We are here, we always have been here, and we always will be, yesterday, today, and always. Pilama Yaye.
Good afternoon, everyone. I get started into the next, I just want to say thank you, Dre, for the land acknowledgement and gracing us with all of your knowledge and unapologetic Indigenous existence, all your two-spirit, trans, non-binary Indigenous existence. Thank you for everything you offer us, and thank you for existing in this space with us. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Banks. I use she, her pronouns. We'll be doing formal introductions later, but I'll be moving into an ancestral calling for all BIPOC individuals. Just so you know, I may be reaching all over the place. I'm still admitting people as they come in because CPT, but I will go ahead and move into this ancestral calling, and I will slow down for the interpreters. Sorry. All right. We will now move into a practice called ancestral calling. This practice is for all Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and yes, even white passing BIPOC individuals, and even multiracial BIPOC individuals, and even those of you like me who exist within the blood and the ancestry of white colonizers. If you exist within any BIPOC identity, I do welcome you to practice this with us. To accommodate a secure environment, because safety does not exist for BIPOC individuals within white supremacy. To just secure the space for BIPOC folks to engage in this practice, I ask now for all white colonizers and white people in attendance to turn off their cameras, and I welcome all BIPOC individuals to turn on their cameras if that's accessible to you. I'll give you a minute. I would love to see all of your beautiful brown faces. Come on, give it to me. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Popping up. I see y'all. All right. So thank you for turning off your cameras, white colonizers and white folks. I just wanted to do that just so we can secure this space for BIPOC folk, so we can bring our ancestors into this space and throughout this direct action. Before we get started, I'll explain what this practice is, as it can be intimidating and unknown for some BIPOC folk. This is not, and I repeat, is not a religious practice. This is a spiritual practice. This is not to be led, appropriated, and stolen by white colonizers. This practice is ours. This practice arises from the continued desire to connect with our ancestors, to allow them to live through us, with us, and bring them with us through the day, and in times when we need their guidance and wisdom the most. This practice is for all BIPOC folk who exist within the diaspora that is perpetuated by colonization and white supremacy. As some of you know, especially descendants of enslaved Africans and other indigenous peoples, many times we have no recollection of, because they were intentionally erased from history. This is a way to connect with our past ancestors, connected by blood and or by collective struggle. I will now lead you through how to engage in this practice. You will first express gratitude in whatever way is accessible to your body, to your ancestors. That can be through dancing, that can be through saying a verbal affirmation, any type of offering you can give them in this time. Give them your water that's next to you, give them an apple if you have it, if you have access, whatever you have as an offering. Next, you will identify what you need from your ancestors in addition to what you will commit to giving them, because oftentimes when we call on our ancestors, we have this idea of taking and taking, and although this may seem like a transaction, it should not be framed in that way. We'll commit to giving moment to move down, and if not, often see individuals and Steele and just other folks that you're spiritually connected with. So I'm just going to give you like this, and you can at least 3 moments you would like to give that in a way that you so on my
All right, everyone, technical difficulties. This is kind of common for Ryan's end. We're gonna wait a second and then we'll move into this. But I hope that in this moment you can get some water, get some food if that's accessible for you. Take care of yourself in this moment. We'll wait for Ryan to hop back on.
So sorry about that, y'all. Can you hear me? Are we good? Can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, y'all. Sorry. Okay, I will go back to what I was saying. So yeah, this is my example. I call on my ancestors to grant me graciousness, patience, and love to move through this day and moment that honors them and my community in a way that warrants strides to true abolition and collective liberation. So I just want y'all to remember, if you do not know the names, that is okay. The system intentionally set it up that way. This is a way to resist what was stripped from us, our language, identity, lineage, and all things that would promote connectivity and beloved community. We claim all that is ours by talking and calling on our ancestors, known and unknown. We move collectively in all our unapologetic melanated power, and yes, the fuck we do. You can call on folks like Baldwin, Fred Hampton, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Nina Pop, Orlando Castile, Breonna Taylor, etc., whoever you need to assist you in existing this time, being fully present and mindful. Now, I'll give you all a few minutes to call on your folks, bring them here with you, and then after at least 2 minutes, I will go ahead and let white folks turn their cameras back on. All right, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and bring you back now. I would just like to say, sit with that, sit with them, allow them to be existing in this space with everyone that you allow them to. but also protect your energy, protect your ancestors as they would protect you. And at this time, I do welcome white folks to turn their cameras back on, as we would love to see everyone's faces as we're holding everyone accountable throughout this event. So I welcome everyone now. We'll move now into the organizer introductions, and I'm going to pass that off to Dre.
Hello, hello. My name is Dre, and as I shared in the land acknowledgement, my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I've introduced my identity, but beyond that, beyond how I present and who I embody, I am a community organizer. I organize an intersectional, anti-speciesist, anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-capitalist community by the name of Interspecies Liberation, and we focus on making compassionate living and consistent anti-oppression as accessible as possible for as many people as possible through education and direct action. I assist with other community projects, and I hope to continue to share space and create new projects with fellow educators and organizers who are in attendance today and will be on this event. So happy to be here. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Dre. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin, as I mentioned at the beginning. And I just want to say thank you for joining us in this space today. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a non-Indigenous, triracial, queer individual. I've lived in many places in my life, but I currently reside in Boise, Idaho. I am currently a full-time student working towards a BS in social psychology and also a community organizer. Some of the projects that I'm involved in include a BIPOC created and led community garden that should be coming into fruition and flourishing in the spring of 2021. And I am also working with multiple community members in a startup nonprofit organization that will bring support to other BIPOC community members and queer community members who are most impacted by white supremacy, colonization, exploitation, and disenfranchisement. We're calling the project the Community Care Coalition. Thank you.
Hey everyone, yet again, it's your girl Ryan, back at it. Here's my introduction for y'all. Yeah, just good afternoon, community, yet again. My name is Ryan Banks. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a non-Indigenous biracial woman in the Boise area. I'm an intersectional social justice community organizer. I'm also involved in developing the Community Care Coalition with Dre and Kevin and so many other individuals, as well as the community garden and all the things. My main focus is just creating sustainable community-based projects that will live on and nourish so many individuals, so we can truly lean into the abundance of beautiful, beloved community. I'm also a student at Boise State, have the privilege of attending a higher education institution. I'm a political science major with a minor in ethnic studies towards my bachelor's degree. Hope to go to law school after this. And I just like to remind folks that my intersectional organizing is based off of an ancestral calling framework, as well as an abolitionist framework. So with that said, I'm just so excited to be in community with y'all today. Hopefully from this event, we can learn to move in a space of abolition, transformative justice, and relearn what it truly means to love and center the last person. So yes, and thank you everyone. I'm so happy you're here. All these brown people, I'm here for it. So now we're actually gonna move into a video. This video does have all the trigger warnings that we said in the beginning. This video may promote some fragility, so I ask y'all to lean into that. Something Gabby just likes to remind us is that, you know, if we're feeling uncomfortable or we're feeling like we need a bio break or we're just listening to our bodies and this is just not something that's comfortable for you, we do encourage you to log off and log back on. but I would like for y'all to listen to log off and log back on, but also for other legitimate insecurity and lack of safety. So we're going to go ahead with this.
America. I'm Donna, and I'm here with my friends to tell you the real history behind this holiday. Growing up, I knew that what they told you in school about Thanksgiving wasn't true. That's not the true story. The true story behind Thanksgiving was, after every killing of a whole village, these European settlers celebrated it, and they called it Thanksgiving. But it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln became president that it became an official holiday.
He ordered 38 Dakota men to be hung for war crimes.
After the sacred holiday Christmas.
We take this time to remember our elders who lost their lives due to what really happened. Usually my mom makes a Native American dish for us and we pray.
Growing up, I would be kind of annoyed that they didn't know what actually happened on Thanksgiving and that they're actually celebrating the deaths of many people and many tribes that were lost.
Whether it's to give thanks or to be with your family, you should learn how the holiday was established in the first place.
I'm thankful for being born indigenous to this continent.
I'm thankful that I still have my culture.
I'm thankful that my elders kept our culture alive all these years.
I'm thankful to be indigenous, resilient, and alive.
I'm thankful for us all to be able to stand together, stand strong, and stand as one.
Happy Thanksgiving, America.
Thank you everyone for staying and watching that. Just to be clear, I know that was a little blurry. The first video was from PETO's, a campaign showing basically from a turkey exploited for flesh and meat from your table, and just going back like a whole minute to like when they were once alive, once living their lives, and still being exploited by the agricultural and like mass meat production, mass flesh production business due to capitalism, white supremacy, and colonization. Second video was just these badass indigenous individuals doing all the badassery shit. So if those weren't super accessible to you, please put your email in the chat directly to me at Ryan Banks and I can send that video directly to you. But thank you for watching, and we're gonna now move into some other things. But before we move into our amazing guest speakers today, I'm really happy to present Kevin, as he's gonna lead us through some breathing exercises, as those videos could have been traumatic.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so like Ryan said, we're just gonna do some breathing exercises to ground us back into this space as we prepare to listen to our speakers. I invite everyone to join in if it is accessible to you. We will be focusing our energy around our hearts, and If you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes and put your hands over your heart. If that is not comfortable for your body, you do not need to do that. You can keep your eyes open. Please do what works for you. And we're just going to be taking 8 to 10 really deep breaths as community, a community breath together. And how we're going to be doing this is breathing in, filling our lungs and expanding our chest and our rib cage, and holding on to that breath for a few split moments, and then doing a controlled slow exhale out. And as I said, we'll do that 8 to 10 times. So we'll start right now. Take a deep breath in, pull it in, feel your lungs expanding your chest and ribs. And we'll start to slowly control the exhale out. Really feeling that contraction. Take another deep breath in. Another one out. And really just moving in that rhythm. Taking one back in. Just a few more. Just really focusing that energy around your heart. I'll invite you to take one last deep breath. And a slow exhale out. All right, thank you everyone for joining in that. Dre?
Thank you so much, Kevin. All right. Mishnala Ohape Iekie Kihie, Melanie Fillmore, Metawa Takeke Chi. I am absolutely honored to introduce my elder and a beloved community member, Melanie Fillmore. Melanie is Hunkpapa Lakota from the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. They are a seeker of the beloved community they embody, and they hold a Master of Arts in Political Science, and they are a current PhD student of Public Policy and Administration. They pay special attention to settler colonial violence and authority perpetrated in policy, as well as the movement of Indigenous and Black folk. Their purpose is to bridge the needs of activism and scholarship and data. Pilama Yaye and Taha Yahi, thank you and welcome, Melanie.
Whew. Thank you. It's I have a lot of feelings about being able to be introduced in my own language, so it feels good to hear that. Which means I greet you with a happy heart here today. I want to start off by telling two stories. The first one is a dream that I had. And in this dream, I am running. I'm a runner in real life. I love to work out, and running and bike riding is a way that I connect to my body in a healthy way. And so when I run and I feel exerting that energy, I come back to my body, call my body back to my spirit back to my body in a good and healthy way. And in my dream, it was really foggy. And you know how for my family and my relatives here who live in Boise, you know how foggy Boise can get. You can't even see the mountains sometimes, it's so foggy. Sometimes you can't even see the street lights around you. So I'm running and it's really foggy and I feel the wind, and it's a wind that you can feel push against your body. And it felt really dark and cold. And in my dream, my ancestors came, and I had half my ancestors on my left side were all lined up. All my indigenous ancestors were on my left side. And on the other side were my white ancestors. And I'm standing in between them, and I can feel them pulling me through that wind, through that pressure. And while I was so excited to see my ancestors, I could feel the tension of my white ancestors and my indigenous ancestors staring at each other across as they're looking at me, but they're pulling me through. They're pulling me through the fog. They're pulling me through the wind. And it was in that moment I saw and could feel the tension that existed within me, not just from the external forces, but the tension of my ancestors facing each other. But they still pulled me through. And I could feel a tremendous sense of love. And I share that story because I don't think that, I think that so many of our relatives here are a manifestation of the love of their ancestors, but they're also a manifestation of the tension of the realities that we live within our own families, whether that's a story of colonization or rape or you know, the way that our ancestors have, you know, willed us to existence, right? Living through and moving through this space and through this time of colonization and white supremacy. And the other story I'd like to share with you today is one I haven't shared with too many people, but it involves, I have only been in the last 2 years recently divested myself from a very conservative religious institution, which has been a journey, a long journey, a long, painful journey that I've only come to share with a few choice people. It meant divesting myself of a community that I thought loved and cared about me. It meant divesting myself from harmful and, you know, internalized oppression and beliefs. But it also meant coming to grips with the story of how colonization has impacted my life and continues to impact my life. And it continues to impact all of our communities today, you know? So what I wanted to offer was just some space to hold our own, the way that we hold our own stories, the way that we've moved our bodies and our minds through this time, through this place, no matter where you are, no matter your life experiences, no matter the internal colonization, no matter the internalized white supremacy you've experienced, that you make room for those stories and that we move through them as beloved community to heal and to, I think part of healing in beloved community is acknowledging the pain and the heartache of those stories and finding healthy ways to tell that story and to be in community with your relatives who understand that story and how painful that story is. Which is really what I wanted to focus my remarks on today, was how do we share what does it mean to exist in this time and now? How do we share the stories of our ancestors? Does it mean that we tell those stories in the context of white history? Does it mean that we hold to the way that white history has said that those things have happened, so long ago, that they impacted those people back then, but they don't impact us now? Because that's what we're taught to believe about history and how those stories are held. They're held in this linear time fashion, right? This happened at this date and happened this date, right? Seems like it goes in a line, but Indigenous people have never held to that. And when I think about, our Black relatives who are in community, who are in beloved community, I think about the fact that you all are Indigenous people. Your ancestors were Indigenous people with their own Indigenous practices. And you were trafficked, your ancestors being trafficked here. But we're Indigenous people in that story. And one of the things that I think about when we think about dramatic shifts in our ancestors' history is that our people became really good at adapting. We shared the stories of survival because that's how we kept our children alive. And in one of my favorite books that I'll be drawing a lot of my thoughts today on, it's called Beyond Settler Time by Mark Rifkin, who's an Indigenous author, pulls from another author, says, those who will not change do not survive. But who are we when we have survived? And I want to pose that to you in these thoughts, to our white relatives, but also to our Indigenous and our Black relatives. Like, who are we once we've survived? And I think about how we hold those stories, what religious institutions have told us about these stories. What are the myths that have persisted in these stories? And I think so much of it is that we tell the parts of the story that assuage the guilt, that assuage the pain, that assuage, then they allow for different parts of the story of things like Thanksgiving to come through, but they hide the pain. They hide it in that fog. One of the things that those myths do is they remove the pain of Indigenous people. They remove the important parts of the story about what our ancestors had to teach us to help us survive. And for Indigenous people, what that did, Mark Rifkin, he says, to be authentic means to preserve forms of tradition that emanate from the past in pristine ways. That performance stasis of condition of possibility for being accorded status as a proper Indian. Such enactments of aboriginally explicitly and implicitly serve as the basis for grudgingly partial and circumscribed governmental acknowledgement of native sovereignty. Basically, the idea is that we became preserved in this notion of indigeneity of the past, that once we were disconnected from our land, from our people, we were no longer Indigenous, that we were no longer the stories of our ancestors, that we became disconnected from the language and the way that we talked about it and the way that we told our stories, right? Another thing that when we share the stories of Thanksgiving under the white telling of them, is that it's forced Indigenous people to lose our sense of our own Indigenous tellings of time and place. Philip Deloria says that some Indian people, more than we've been led to believe, leapt quickly into modernity, adding, they leapt, I think, because it became painfully clear that we were not distant from the history that was even then being made, whether they liked it or not. Other people were building a world around or on top of and through Native American people. That world took as its material base the accumulation of capital ripped from indigenous lands and resources and labor over the course of the centuries. The sharedness of native and non-native coexistence and influence on each other appears here as a mutual participation in modernity. But given that some native people leapt into it, modernity also indicates that it exists separately from the temporal experiences of native people prior to that point. What I'm asking here, our relatives, is to think about the parts of the story we lose when we perpetuate the myths. The parts of the story that we lose because we don't acknowledge the pain and the harm of our Indigenous and Black community. The parts of the story that we essentially don't recognize in our queer or our Indigenous folks, our Black folks, which is a piece of who we are, because our ancestors taught us those stories for us to survive in the here and now. And so when I think about these tellings and the stories that are told in these ways, it erases the way that we have to live now. And I think about that because I too am the mixed race. My mother is white, my father is Indigenous. My father was removed, my grandmother lived through boarding school. My partner is white. My children are white presenting. When we ignore the stories of how that came to be, we end up having to justify our living, our life now, to the state, to our communities. And that's not what beloved community does. Beloved community, we still have work to do to heal within ourselves, within our own community, to uphold these stories, to uphold the pain and the harm that our ancestors have lived through. And the state policies then that have tried to erase the harm in it does not serve us. It doesn't serve our health or our well-being or our spirits, our minds, our bodies. And it doesn't serve our community. And so I hope that today, that in sharing these things, that it's okay to feel the pains and the hurts this week. That it's okay to accept and to recognize and honor the harm that our ancestors have gone through. The genocide and the pain, the rape, and the stories of survival that our ancestors told us in order to move through this space. But it's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel the pain and the harm that came with trying to fit in to places and spaces and institutions that weren't serving us, what we thought were for our good, or for whatever reason that we felt we needed to belong to those spaces. It's okay to acknowledge that. It's also okay to come into beloved community and to ask for help, for guidance, to seek for knowledge how to continue to move forward in a healthy and a good way towards beloved community, towards a place of health and healing, to a place of boundaries of what you're going to accept or not accept within your lives, your spirit, your body. And so I want to bring, I'm holding this piece of sweetgrass here that's been braided. I think it was gifted to me by one of my my elders and community here, that we keep on telling these stories, that we make space for these stories, for those of you who are carrying both white and settler, who carry the stories of genocide within your blood, within your body. For those of you who are settlers, who are settlers here, whose ancestors impacted the lands, you know, making room to understand how we've impacted this land is what recognition means. That we allow for the stories to be shared, for the harm to be told in its true, in its painful forms, so that we can see a future beloved community that honors and upholds our whole beings. And for folks of color, it is honoring and upholding those stories that shape us, the roles and ways in which violence and state policies have shaped our being into a community now. And so with that, I want to thank Ryan and Kevin and Dre for allowing me to speak at this, and to be spending time with you all, and to see your lovely faces, especially in this week and in this time of I feel like Unchimaka is telling us to, Mother Earth is trying to tell us to spend some time in deep contemplation during this, you know, time of coronavirus, and to isolate and to reflect on our relationship with the land and the water, and also to reflect on how we can heal to be better members of our beloved community, and our goal for liberation and for seeking our health and happiness for one another. And with that, and Pilamiaye Mitakoya Asun, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, I just want to reiterate again, if people are jumping on and weren't here at the beginning, that there are mental health counselors available on this Zoom call. You can reach them privately in the chat. Their names are Gabrielle Davis and Andrea Pikes. And with that, I will be introducing our next speaker. Her name is Yvette Baker. And Yvette is a Los Angeles-based writer, social critic, and intersectional activist whose work is devoted to exposing and analyzing the intersections of human and non-human oppression. He aims to empower the vegan movement as a movement for total liberation. Over to you, Yvette.
Thank you, Kevin. I hope everyone can hear me well. Good, okay. This has been so beautiful so far, so like beyond what I could have asked for. So thank you all for putting this on, and thank you very much to all of the Interspecies Liberation organizers for having me. Nothing at all satiates my soul more than seeing young people, and I'll include myself in that, radicalizing and organizing, and the dedication and bravery and sacrifice it takes to disrupt and divest from colonial systems that are so deeply embedded within our American culture and within our psyches. So I come here as an offering of my experiences and hardships and my lessons learned, with my solidarity to do my part in helping continue the disruption essential to dismantling oppressive structures and liberating all beings. And I sincerely value everyone who makes space to normalize this anti-Thanksgiving. Thank you. So to start, I feel principally obligated to point out that although I am Afro-Indigenous, the granddaughter and daughter of two bold and very proud Indigenous women by whom I was raised, any Indigenous person, as I, can only share their own experiences and speak from their knowledge, and cannot represent all Indigenous peoples and all Indigenous perspectives. So I remind you that every story and every perspective will be different. I remind you that Indigenous people look very different, and just to be mindful of imposing this Indigenous American ideology that tries to box us into an ethnic or cultural monolith. And as such, there are Indigenous Americans, Indigenous peoples and individuals who choose to celebrate Thanksgiving as we've come to know it in the more traditional American ways. And it's for none of us, not within our place, to crucify or judge how any Indigenous person is coping with the centuries of generational trauma that is colonialism itself, the physical and mental subjugation, or how they're choosing to honor the resilience within a settler society that continuously tries to erase them. I myself have come to choose anti-Thanksgiving for myriad reasons, but foremost to honor my ancestors and mourn the lives taken by genocide, but also to bring much greater light to the racism and oppression that continued colonialism and imperialism that devastate Native tribes and individuals. And moreover, as an anti-speciesist, which should be and once was encompassed by the term vegan before that too was whitewashed, I do stand in solidarity alongside non-humans in their fight for liberation, none of whom ever consent to being dismembered centerpieces on a decorative table. As the brilliant writer, professor, social activist, and social critic Bell Hooks once wrote, "The soul of our politics is in the commitment to ending domination." And although this instance she was speaking to the realm of feminism, it stands that in no way can we address domination without addressing systems of hierarchies, and in no way can we address hierarchies without including our unnecessary use of non-humans as the epitome of what it looks like to dominate or exploit. And no, it turns out that I'm not at all interested in veganizing the commodification of the turkey or promoting a vegan-friendly genocide, and have no interest in perhaps mass producing and overindulging in stunt doubles of other exploited and commodified beings in order to indicate my thankfulness. And my mouth doesn't really start watering over the glorification and obsession, inevitably turning entitlement to yet another monocrop, while believing that we can place such a high market demand on anything without negative consequence. And lastly, with an Indigenous spirit, it feels contradictory to my worldview to set a specific day aside to give thanks and honor for all that I have, internally and externally, as I feel it perhaps to be the most important spiritual awareness for one to have each and every day. But as for the veganizing that I mentioned, this is an example of white veganism, which has the mainstream community homed in on diet and lifestyle, vegan options, vegan capitalism as a celebratory solution to ending suffering. You may find the promotion of the theory that the end of suffering is predicated on just finding enough compassion or empathy to value the life of a cow or a chicken, coupled with the lifestyle commitment of buying faux leather and soy nuggets. If we just label anything and everything that causes the least intentional harm to domesticated non-humans only as cruelty-free, and ignore that our vegan lifestyles may in fact be causing additional harm and suffering somewhere else, all the while choosing to remain silent and apolitical about the lands being poisoned, ravaged, stolen, and destroyed, as well as all of the humans and free-living non-humans being displaced, and the lives taken by the complicity and often enthusiastic support of that which requires infinite growth, aka capitalism. So this has me departing for a moment to address this signature move of whiteness, to repackage the reality of any situation wherever necessary to both absolve its guilt and to center itself, its own lifestyle as we speak about the oppression of someone else. If you would like an example, this may be familiar from a recent episode during this social uprising against racial inequity and systemic injustice. There was initially an outpouring of resources and aid to the communities most impacted by institutionalized and structural racism that quickly flipped around on its head to focus on the white Westerner's anti-racist journey. Which anti-racist books are we buying for our anti-racist book club? Which ethnic influencer, regardless of experience or credentials, can I get to make an unpaid experience on my podcast? And as Black and Indigenous people of color, myself guilty as well, we began then using our voices and all of our energy to focus on educating white people and answering all of their questions and messages that started with, I know this isn't about me, but, and then making an exhaustive statement or question that was explicitly about them and their perceptions. So yes, that happens a lot. And so as we speak about these societal issues, these isms, I just want to really challenge everyone to store tangible examples or ideas of what all of these terms really mean, because with social media especially, we can quickly overuse and misuse these terms on these topics, terms like genocide and colonialism, especially when what we're truly talking about is white predatory violence. I want more of us to think about disparities beyond their statistical listings and think about the actual lives on the unfavorable end of those numbers and sit with the imagining of those realities. And once we've truly set with them, internalize them, that they're real, to please seek whatever resources or organizations that can help you realize your potential in helping those who need it most. We really can't get stuck or complacent and don't have any more time to revel in our think pieces and wokeness revelations, touting screen grabs from Twitter as a means to inveigle others to join our movements. We have to act. That said, if you're new or newer to these spaces of taking action and challenging the status quo, I'm willing to be the one to give you the fair warning that your resistance more likely than not will alter or even end relationships with a few friends and or family members. And you will almost without a doubt hear a version of the following at some point. Why can't you see that you're separating us? Why further dividing us by trying to be some kind of revolutionary? These so-called progressive movements are just a trap and you're falling right into them. Yeah, I never get tired of hearing those. It's really awesome. But yes, you are choosing to challenge a powerful capitalist tradition made even more seemingly indestructible by being used as a tool for the illusion of unity and effectively used, whether intentionally or inadvertently, to pacify and shield our true native history and the ongoing repercussions of that history. So if it helps anyone, I lend my response that I've formulated and somewhat fine-tuned over the years, making clear this is in response to those defending the status quo and upholding the paradigm, the continuing mythology that unequal power dynamics do not exist on an institutional or systemic level. I explain that if you're willing to accept Thanksgiving, Columbus Day, or any other holidays or traditions that whitewash and plow over my very own existence, and even more audaciously accept them on my behalf, then you are not respecting my humanity, and we have always been separated and divided, and you've only never cared to notice exactly how much, nor how much I've grown utterly exhausted and truly sickened by the renaming and the rebranding of my pain and intimate trauma, as it has never relented as far back as the English and Spanish colonizers who forced the renaming and redefining of everything for us, right down to the land that we stood on and our very own identities. You know, I guess something to that effect, but it depends on what kind of time I got and depends on how they come at me, you know. But my hope for everyone here, everyone hearing my voice, is that you never, ever, 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 ever allow yourself to exist timidly with the fear of hurting the feelings of those who stand in the way of your physical or spiritual liberation. We all deserve our freedom. So in closing, even if you don't feel exactly politically or spiritually aligned with all that I've said or anything that I've said, I still urge you to take a more critical look at Thanksgiving as it's promoted as a time of peace and contentment, a time and a space to be grateful for what and whom we already have in our lives. Because if you only have to look directly in front of your face to see the evidence that other lives were exploited and taken just in order for us to celebrate our own, consider the possibility of mental colonization having numbed you, some arbitrary indoctrination and pursuit of profit above anything else having socialized you right out of your inherent moral agency. Please consider challenging the idea that the unnecessary amount of suffering on our plates and in the aftermath of genocide somehow symbolizes warmth, beauty, and togetherness. And if it doesn't at all feel performative or phony to you on that day, I urge a follow-up assessment the following day in light of the astronomical Black Friday sales, and ask yourself, what am I really thankful for giving, and what am I really thankful for taking away? Thank you.
All right, y'all. Hold up. Yvette, you just went off. Oh, I'm still ecstatic about that. I'm gonna need a minute before I move into the next segment. You know what, folks?
That was a little nerve-wracking. I spoke from the heart, I wrote from the heart, but the energy before me was so peaceful and gentle, and you know, we're all coming from different places, and I feel peace having my ancestors and this community, but I also feel a lot of rage and a lot of turmoil, and I think with this particular speech, that side came out. And thank you everyone for receiving it however you did.
Thank you so much, Yvette. What I want to say to that is rage is beautiful, and rage is a blessing. And thank you for blessing all of us with all that revolutionary rage. I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna hold that, and I hope everyone else does as well and leans into that. And towards the end of this, we are gonna drop payment information for all of the Indigenous people that were incorporated in this process. And I do urge you, if you have the financial security, to pay them. So right now we're gonna kind of go ahead and move into the community discussion / reflection, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do an intro. So yeah, just hello everyone. I hope you're feeling refreshed and energized, especially after Melanie's and Yvette's kind of formal and informal storytelling and speeches. And I really hope you're leaning into all the uncomfortability and fragility that comes with everything we've given to you, we've offered to you. With that said, we're now going to move into a community discussion / reflection based on some of the things we watched and heard today. But before we get started, I am so happy, so happy to introduce Kellen Lewis. I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself. But right before that, I'm just going to say he'll just be present during the community discussion / reflection, chiming in to talk about his lived experiences as they pertain to the certain prompts that we offer or the discussion we engage in as we move through this. But of course, as his capacity permits. So I'm going to go ahead and let Kellen go ahead and introduce himself.
Well, hello, everyone. I thought I had words, and then Dre started off, and then Mel built on it, and then Yvette came through, and I was just like, oh, I guess I have nothing. And I just say a massive ditto to each and every one of you. Just thank you so much for your heart and your story. Truly, truly. And tatsalahin oikolo. Watu inum was winit to token timki. So I put timki when I kiss Kellen Lewis. In Liloitznin was ki kina oikolo ki piomkin zumpa. Katsiaya haniwa ki lahin. Nunum cups now it, upsukoi now it, ka hat to it. Katsiaya ko oikolo ki kinki. Nu liloitzich ka eitzich. I said hello and good day to everyone, speaking in Nimi Putimski, the Nez Perce language. In West Nimi Pu ka Tzimtzamach. I am both Nez Perce and Black. I come from African American ancestry. I mentioned that I do not have an Indian name, which was a point of contention for me growing up and something that I've had to work with, because that's a part of how we introduce ourselves, starting with our Indian name. However, I mentioned that my English name is Kellen Lewis. I gave thanks to Creator for this day, and for our gathering here on Zoom. Also giving thanks and asking for strength, for wisdom, and for love for all of us here today. And I, again, just am so emboldened. Like I've loved everything that has been mentioned by Dre, Mel, and Yvette. And one of the things that really was coming out to me as Mel was speaking was about the fog and the stories that we hear. And I just kept getting this resounding echo in my ear of a Chief Joseph quote, who Chief Joseph is one of the most well-known Nez Perce leaders. And his quote, "It does not require many words to speak the truth." And I've always held on to that because it's helped me to really dial into what I want to say. And if I'm really truly speaking from the heart, and if I'm speaking sincerely and truthfully, that it has an ease to it. And I often forget that the first part of that quote is that the white man has many ways to tell his story, but it does not require many words to tell the truth. And so thinking of that fog and of the stories that come around, it just hit me right when you were speaking. I was like, I often forget the top of that because I hold on to the root that really gets to me. And as another way of reclaiming myself, as of late too, I found in the same way that you were speaking of, Mel, really holding on to your identity and expressing it. Yvette mentioned so brilliantly that there is just such a diverse landscape of Indigenous, First Nations, First American identities. And it's beautiful for us to all hold on to that in our own ways. And for me, I often felt a lot of shame in both the mix that I have, because I felt that it set me apart from my communities, and it also didn't allow me to present myself as I grew up. I grew up with 2 Native American families, and so I wore a lot of Native American beadwork and symbolism. And I often think of moments when I've gotten a lot of pushback from people for a specific image that I wear that's Indigenous to our tribe. And I made this piece here for myself a few months ago in honor of, a few weeks ago, in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day. And I made it right before that. Anyways, moral is that it's a reclamation, and it's the supplis, which I'll come a little bit closer. Supplis in Nez Perce means whirlwind, and it honors the rounds of the 4 seasons, especially as they pertain to the North Star. And it was both a way of protecting our people for when they made their journeys, whether it was trading or for hunting. You find the North Star in order to navigate, as well as a way to be resolute in yourself. The word North Star, lukup sime, in Nez Perce literally means to beat or to pulsate like the heart, lukup, and sime, which means not doing or not moving, to be unwavering. So the North Star is that beating pulse, that heartbeat in the sky that is unmoving. So no matter where you are in life or in the world, you can always put your heart, matamina, your heart, to lukup sime, and you can find steadiness. And it's also a reminder for yourself that, I can be unmoving and I can be unwavering and really find peace within myself, Aowen, peace. And so, yes, just wearing this alone, often people take the symbol and they see ways that it has been used in recent centuries and, switched, because it's not the exact same. However, I've gotten a lot of pushback from that. And so it caused a lot of shame. And now it's really coming to the point where it's like really taking the moment to reclaim our identities. And this is something that's been with my people for millennia. And so now it's helping me to be resolute. And I put that on today to help me with all that I wanted to share with you all here today. And so I thank each and every one of you for for again being here and for allowing me the space and a moment to speak and share just a little bit of my story. And thank you again to the hot fire that crossed over Yvette, Mel, Dre, all of it. Over here with chills. My palms are still sweating. I was like, oh my gosh, Kevin, we need another breathing exercise. So yes, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kellen. Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and move into our community discussion. So yeah, now I'd just like to make clear that this is a community discussion that will center BIPOC individuals and those non-human individuals exploited by this holiday and every day. This will also be a reflection and just like an introspection and some sprinkles in of accountability and all the things. So we do expect community to engage while first giving BIPOC folk priority. If you would like to verbally speak, please use the raise hand feature and Dre will go ahead and call on you if that's accessible to you. Please use, and you will be called on. Yep, I already said that, my bad. We also encourage folks to use the chat box as well. So here's a kind of just like guidelines that are loosely held, but we will present prompts for community to reflect on internally and externally. We will also take questions for the guest speakers. Inappropriate questions will be filtered out. This is not a panel, but a community discussion and a reflection. We expect community to engage with each other. I am merely a facilitator, just to ensure we eliminate like any type of hierarchy within community engagement, discussion, and accountability. At this time, you can now send all your questions directly to me through the chat feature. If you have difficulties with the chat feature, go ahead and let Dre know, raise your hand, and they will give you a little blurb. So yes, we will now take questions, and if we're sitting here for 2 minutes and no one wants to engage, we definitely have some mind-boggling questions for y'all. So at this time, I really do promote and expect engagement for whatever is accessible to you, and just to be sure, you know, kind of just like a move up, move back. Like if you are sharing a lot and you find that you're sharing a lot, or one of the facilitators makes some verbal movements to move away from what you're saying or call on someone else, maybe that's the time for you to move back and listen. But if you're not saying a lot, if you're not engaging a lot in whatever's accessible to you, maybe that's a chance for you to move up. So with whatever is comfortable, whatever is accessible, I will take those questions now. Alrighty. What's up, y'all? Anyone writing questions? You can also, if you raise your hand and you want to say a question out loud just to engage, things that hit you, some reactions, even just some like prompts of fragility, like what were some things you had resistance to today, and like why, and kind of what are the steps you're going to take to move forward with that. Like this is a chance for us to communicate and move together in a way that, one, we're holding ourselves accountable, each other accountable, but also learning how to relearn love and what that looks like for everyone here, so we can move out of this space and like incorporate what we learned into different spaces. So I just didn't want this to be something where we were just talking at you the whole time you consumed information, but like also finding ways to articulate the information you've received and whatever's accessible to you, and also put it into practice. So with that said. Oh my gosh, my sister Ace has their hand up. Is that, you have your hand up, Ace? And you're on mute.
Yes, I do have my hand up. So I do have kind of a question, because I've had multiple people just kind of like walking by. So what is one way that we can, on the lowest base level, where we as a culture of humanity, basically, how do we change this Thanksgiving into something that's going to be more beneficial for all of us, instead of just one of us sitting out this time? I guess that's my question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no apologies. Thank you so much for engaging. Thanks for being the first person. Yeah, so again, I'm just facilitating. I'm just going to try to make sure everyone has time to speak. So at this time, if anyone has answers or anyone has ways they would like to address that question, I do encourage you to raise your hand. Dre will call on you and we can move through that. And again, there's no one right answer and there's no either or, because either or mentality is white supremacy. So move through this in a way that offers more fluid options and just more options in general that we can all move through, and that's accessible to everyone, just applying the last person framework in your answers if that's something you're familiar with. And if anyone has difficulty understanding the questions or anything, please let me know and I could probably try to reiterate them.
Okay, I had my hand raised, so I'm
sorry.
No, you're fine. Thank you for that question. And again, like Ryan said, thank you for being the first one. It's not an answer. It's more of a response to that. But I would challenge the reimagining of what celebration looks like, and also is the point to modify these already institutionalized holidays, or is the point to create something that is for all of us to enjoy? And that's it.
Thank you so much for that reflection prompt. Also, a community member named Roy actually just asked if we can just put questions in the chat if you're uncomfortable speaking, and if that's not accessible to you, please go ahead and do that. And also you can write your answers in the chat as prompts come up and as we're in communication. But also as we're moving through these conversations, I want to make sure that we're incorporating some really important vocabulary, but also making sure our language is not human-centered. So I know Dre specifically and Yvette can help us move through that and call us in when we're being human-centered. But yeah, does anyone else have any other responses to Ace's question? Kellen, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess it helps because he said at a super base level, and that's literally where I'm at. I'm like at a super base level, like what is actionable here in the moment. And I think it just comes back to what I was saying before about truth, and that for me in this very moment, I feel that dialogue is like the very first thing that I'm able to go to, because there's also this issue of separating truth from tradition, and that even within my family structure, you know, this is still a moment where people can gather and you know, outside of COVID, and share in community, to share in tradition, and to give thanks and to honor. And so it's how do you separate that from everything else? And so really, like, the first thing that I think of on a base level, like basics, is honestly just dialogue and speaking with my family, and speaking truthfully about what is actually happening. Yvette said something so beautifully about a dismembered centerpiece on a table. You know, even just that was like, you know, and if you open up that framework to people, then it at least gets the ball rolling, and that's super base level. Because even within our communities, knowing the truth and still feeling the effects of the continued erasure and the slow genocide, it's still not always discussed, you know, and it's still not always detached from what is just currently happening in society. And so even just bringing that up can be powerful. Base level.
Thank you so much, Kellen. Yeah, I'm gonna offer space for like one more engagement and then we can move on to other questions. Yes, I'm going to try to pronounce your name, so call me in if I all the way fuck this up. Is it Madavi?
Davi, thank you so much. Yes. I am coming at you all from Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you so much for this wonderful event, and I'm so thankful to have heard about it from the Vegan Abolitionista on Instagram and everything. Thank you so much, Ryan. And Ace, also thank you for the questions. Thank you to all of you for your time and compassion and vulnerability here. I am immediately reminded from these responses to Ace's question of the Madres of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina who are engaging in practices of performative and actionable public mourning at the disappearing of mainly their sons who are political dissidents to regimes in that area. What I feel like we can learn from elderly women in Argentina and what we can learn from indigenous activists and BIPOC activists around the world and from people who suffer trauma is that we are able to take this time, as Kellen said, that we cannot control, is a time off for many people in the United States where we have the opportunity to convene with one another and create a sense of community, to make it not a shy public, or excuse me, a shy private event of shameful emotions and you know, letting myself cry at the terror of this history that we are having to try and fight against. Rather, make our mourning public and make this time a time of word association by doing an anti-Thanksgiving, but then also action and practice association, where our traditions, while similar in some ways in terms of gathering and sharing of food and giving, as it were, are more than that and include the real truths and real history that Yvette and Mel have talked about in their speeches and everything. I feel like we may sort of encourage ourselves this year, as well as going forward, to mourn publicly and to make it not just a spectacle, but something to be seen for what it really is. A continuation of the trauma that we're having to endure, and we're hoping that other people are able to learn from.
Thank you so much for that perspective. That's definitely something to think about. So yeah, I just want to honor you and thank you for that. I actually think this is a good segue into our debrief. I also just want to be conscious about time, although time is a social construct. I do know that a lot of us are bound by capitalism, and this is like a weekday, so I just want to be respectful of everyone and all their priorities. But before we move to the debrief will be the last thing we do. We do want to add some call to actions before we put ourselves in an extremely emotional and introspective state for the debrief today. So we'll go ahead and start with the call to actions, and we'll get it over to that debrief. So I'm going to go ahead and let Dre go ahead and start that off.
Wonderful. All right. First call to action, everyone. Always, always, always research intersectionality. Once again, and always Google exists. So you can always count on that, but we will also be providing a graphic following this event with pages of intersectional anti-speciesists and other incredible indigenous creators, many of who you see here today, you've heard speak. And please review those resources, save and share them.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, the next one, I'm always here for this. Pay reparations to Indigenous creators and organizers, and write letters to the state to pay reparations to the most marginalized individuals.
All right, thanks. We also support Indigenous owned and operated businesses and organizations.
Perfect. Also reflect on how you have internalized superiority and how that shows up in your life.
Next one is going to be avoid the exploitation of human and non-humans in your language, diet, clothing, entertainment choices, and lifestyle. And in general, as far as possible, as is accessible to your body on a daily basis.
Also, use anti-speciesist language with non-human individuals.
And I'll expand on that for a minute, for a real quick second. So when we refer to other species as an it, we are further objectifying and exploiting those individuals. They are a they are a she, they are a he. They are not everything, they are everyone. They are not something, they are someone. So it's really important to critically think about how our language continues to commodify, objectify, and exploit individuals. All right, another call to action. Follow Intersectional Anti-Speciesist on all major platforms, as well as Indigenous creators. And once again, we will have a graphic about that. And I do believe Gabby shared a list of some articles we recommend too.
That's actually how to Google, because everybody always asks questions. That's a link so everybody can learn how to Google.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. All right. Okay. Let me calm down. All right. Invest in Indigenous communities and BIPOC queer-led vegan sanctuaries.
And this is a follow-up. Look out for who to follow, who to pay, and who to censor. Our tags: Interspecies Liberation, Ryan M. Banks, and me, I'm Shalon Lamont on Instagram.
Awesome. And the last thing I'm just going to ask all the Indigenous people who are incorporated in organizing today and all the Indigenous people attending today, please drop your Cash App, Venmos, and PayPals, because we are going to get some non-Indigenous people to pay you today. Oh yes, and Gabby, thanks for putting that out there. I am a co-owner of a BIPOC queer vegan goodies type business, small business, and right now we're having a anti-Thanksgiving sale where we're donating 10% of the proceeds you pay for goods to an Indigenous person of your choice as well, if you're interested in getting some food and also giving some sort of reparations as well, and just support and donations. So, thanks, Gabby. Now we're going to go ahead and move into our debrief. Again, Indigenous people incorporated in this event, please drop your Cash App, Venmos, and PayPals. Please do it right now. Screenshot it. Everyone screenshot that. Ask for their consent first to post it anywhere so they can all get paid. But we're going to now move into the debrief led by Gabrielle Davis and Andrea Pikes.
All right, I'll just say a little quick intro just so everybody knows who the mental health counsels are once again. Gabrielle Davis, she is a LPC and MCC, and Andrea Pikes holds a BS, Bachelor's of Science degree, and is a counseling intern at the moment.
Cool, thank you guys. So for the debrief, we have a couple of questions for you guys, and then I think the way things typically work well is if, you know, if you guys have something that's on your mind or need to get off your chest, and feel comfortable to do so, letting us know either individually or just as a group, and we can talk through that. And we also have resources and just examples of either like self-care or grounding exercises to help with what we've learned. I mean, I was heavy, I feel like, just watching and participating. So, yeah. All right, so the first debrief reflection question, I guess you could say, is what was challenged inside of you during the past couple of hours?
Ryan, did you raise your hand? Oh.
Yeah. And I think also, like I said, like this can be either a group discussion, or it can also be an internal reflection, or even like journal questions that if you want to jot down and write and reflect later. I think that, I mean, some of these are definitely powerful, and it's a way to take what we've learned today and like what you guys have all been saying is just like apply action to it and planning.
I want to say something really quick. I encourage folks to think backwards. And what I mean, like the whole time I've been thinking backwards too, like in between conversing with you all. And when I say think backwards, like think of what you thought this American holiday, specifically American holiday meant. So, and I know culture has a lot to do with that. So for me, as a Black person, I grew up in Detroit. And the first 6 years of my life, I went to a Catholic school. In those 6 years, all my teachers were white, so I only thought that white people could be teachers. They were all white nuns. And then I went to public school, and I realized that I couldn't call my teachers, who are all Black women, sister, like I did at the white school. When I was those first 6 years, I learned about Thanksgiving as an American holiday. And when I got to public school and all my teachers were Black and all the ancillary staff was white, they didn't tell us anything about that. And I know that has to do with geography as well. When I got home, when we, got the traditional fixings for Thanksgiving, and I asked my mom specifically, what did she know about Thanksgiving? And she said, not what those white people told you. And that was it, like it was these things. And so, in school, when I went to Detroit, we didn't learn about American history. We learned about Black history was our basis. And I got to Idaho and realized that Idaho had a history, which is, a whole different thing. I learned that learning takes place in different ways in different places where you are. So like when we talk about anti-racism, being anti-racist and how we have to unlearn things, you have to unlearn these things as well, as far as the true meaning of holidays, who they impact, whether it be, I'm just learning this terminology, whether it be, regardless of what type of species it is, that we have to unlearn and start learning backwards, some of those things. So as a reflection, and as we think about the ways we debrief, I encourage you to also think back, like what did you learn already that needs to be unlearned, or you're starting to unlearn? What can you provide to somebody else in the future so they can, like go on that journey to unlearning, and as Yvette was doing, getting themselves together. Like what can we do in that ways? Any comments on that? I'm comfortable with silence. Like silence is a great thing. Really, like I can sit with silence. But
no, so I would love to answer this. I just want to make sure that I have your question concise in my mind. So you were asking about taking action, sort of unlearning. Do you mind repeating? I'm so sorry. I would love to make sure I have your question correctly.
Yvette, I would be happy to listen to anything you have to say, whatever, however you interpret anything anybody said. If you wanted to comment on the word "the," I will be happy.
Stop.
In what ways can we unlearn some of the things we've been learned and what we've known as traditional, or this American holiday? Like which ways, and the best ways we can unlearn those things.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so it can seem, I'm sure, like an overwhelming task initially, especially, I mean, my speech was all over the place. So, many different stops, but you would start with one thing. You mentioned speciesism and sort of identifying, non-humans as their own person with their own personhood, and away from it and more of a he and she and they, and that takes reframing. And what you start with educating yourself about what the reframing is and why we're reframing it that way, and making sure it makes sense to you. Because if somebody, me or anyone else, says, hey, we don't say that, we say it this way, and it'll be very difficult to stick in your head, and you'll mess up all over the place unless you really understand why. So the resources are really everywhere. I refer back to social media because there's a lot of people who created platforms on specifically educating in this way of unlearning and unframing, reframing. And I do the best that I can with that as well. I'm not so into infographics, but I do have resources on these things. And so once you realize what it is that you're, looking to accomplish, what you're willing to acknowledge, if it's from a genuine place, it sticks. When you realize the harm that your language may be causing to somebody else, it sticks. And again, you may not be perfect, but it's practice. And then you can move on to something else. Don't be overwhelmed. And it's beautiful to always present yourself and say, hey, I'm learning in these spaces, so forgive me if I step in any of the wrong places. And as far as I know, any community in that way, presenting yourself in that way is absolutely commendable, and everybody's super understanding. And yes, I'm speaking for myself as well. I never get offended when people, say any of the things that I wouldn't necessarily say, or frame them in a way that I wouldn't necessarily. It's totally fine. I have a lot to learn and unlearn myself. I've been working at it actively, I think, since I want to say about 1998, maybe. I kind of start thinking, okay, like I have to unlearn a lot of things now, and all this time, it's still every day, it's a process, so don't beat yourself up. You're already in the spaces of the right people to help yourself, and I'm happy to make all of these new connections, really excited, and we learn from each other. That's just how it's done, there's not a lot of books as far as textbooks that we can really trust. We have each other. We have a lot of BIPOC authors now doing the work and making it accessible in all volumes and all levels of accessibility, I should say. More intense academia, and more down to kid-friendly ways to sort of reframe this and sort of have children brace themselves for the lies that they are going to be told if they're, entering public and private school systems. So I hope that answers your question. I did the best I could.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? I do want to take the time to thank the people who were open enough to share via private chat to myself or Andrea. I encourage you to continue sharing and debriefing yourselves outside of this time. I know we have about 6 minutes left, so please don't let the time stop you from working towards whatever goals you have.
I think I would just like to say about unlearning I feel like divesting myself from a religious institution has been the most like incredible unlearning experience of my life. I'm thankful that my partner's really the one that started on that journey before me. And so I'm grateful that I have them along in that. I think one of the things that I am always reminded in our Indigenous teachings is like learning requires relationship, and I think unlearning requires relationship. And I found getting connected to a community of folks that have also undergone that sort of unlearning has been incredibly transformative and has helped alleviate the burden of, you know, taking on the pain of divesting yourself from or whatever it is, processes, practices that have been previously harmful or whatever it is, if you're trying to move into a new pathway of moving or being in the world. That requires relationship and a new way of learning. And I feel really strongly that can't happen in isolation. That has to be. And I think that community is pretty good at, I mean, when you move in beloved community, I feel like you're guided into the places that of folks that can take that on and do that with you.
All right, I want to make sure that we have enough time to get to this probably last debrief question, but I think it's pertinent to kind of just ending this as far as just taking care of yourselves, and that is just how are specifically too for the Black and Indigenous folks here, how are you going to take care of yourself while others are celebrating this American holiday around you?
I can share something that Dre has helped me with a lot. And language is everything. It's everything, but it's so limiting, especially the English language. But something that helps me during really traumatic times, especially like as a fully plant-based person and a person practicing anti-speciesism and intersectional veganism, is presenting this language to my family who still incorporates like the exploitation of non-human individuals in their daily lives and on their plates and on, you know, the things they wear and the things they do throughout their day. So some language that Drake presented to me, which is really alarming, but is really helpful in personifying non-human individuals and addressing human supremacy, is using like, and Drake can help me with this, and I'm sure Yvette can help me with this as well. Like when you refer to meat, it's not really meat, it is flesh. Like when you refer to the things we wear, like it's not fur, it's their hair, and it's their skin. And there's like those types of things that help me get through this, because I'm like, if I can identify what things actually are and bring it to the root, it's easier to articulate and communicate on a base level with other individuals. And I think like I heal through conversation, I heal through deliberation, I heal through like just accountability dialogue. So finding language that creates a common space where we can all understand, so we can move forward, so we can promote collective liberation, human and non-human, has been what's really helpful for me, and especially in times where, you know, in times like Thanksgiving, in times where we do celebrate genocide and white supremacy and capitalism, instead of like uplifting and empowering those voices that have been most marginalized and affected, and like honoring those ancestors who are no longer with us as a result of institutional components in these like continued systems. So that's what helps me.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like just leaning on your strengths as a communicator and as an activist definitely helps you cope with just learning new things and taking this newfound maybe education to heart. Oh, anyone else? How are you all taking care of yourselves?
I'll hop on. I'm so sorry. There's like a speaker in the background. Bless. Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you all so much. The space has been really additive to my learning and just really empowering, and the energy has been really beautiful. And with your question of how we're going to take care of ourselves, one of the things that I've noticed in my mind as I'm thinking about presenting this stuff to my family and to my loved ones and to myself closer, I keep thinking of it as being a burden, or it's so much, and that like it really is so much for me to ask, or that I'm really taking it far, which is what I've been taught to think. And that's something that I think, to take care of myself, I'm going to silence those voices and replace them with other thoughts in my head, so that I feel more affirmed in having these conversations with myself and others. So I'm really grateful that you asked that question, because I've been asking what I'm going to do, but not how I'm going to take care of myself through that, or how I can help. So I'm really grateful for your question. And again, I'm really grateful for everybody in this space.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think Yvette had mentioned that before, of just, you know, I guess the word. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I think, yeah, taking care of ourselves, that we can share this information with others is how we should do it. Well, I know we're on time, probably. So if the organizers want to take it away, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not going to take many more space, but I just wanted to thank everyone for attending today. And I just want to remind y'all to compensate the Indigenous participants and organizers in any way possible, in any way that's accessible to you, and that is not always monetary. If y'all are interested in getting in contact with them to see how you can further support them and love them through the work and through their healing, you can contact any of the organizers here today, and we'll go ahead and ask them for their consent, obviously, and then hopefully make that connection at a later time. So I just want to thank everyone for being here today, for staying, and for hopefully attempting to love yourselves through really traumatizing content. So, and I just want to thank all the speakers and all the people that supported us, and especially the ASL interpreters. And I do want to make it clear that at a later time, we will be posting this video. We recorded this whole session at a later date, and it will have closed captioning for further accessibility.
Yes, Pilama Yaye, thank you all so much. This is normally a week I struggle with, a day I struggle with. I tend to recluse and dwell on all the harm that this day, this week, these institutions continually perpetrate. And I have to say that seeing community come together today for this event has brought me all the joy, all the way Yogpi, all the joy today. I really understand and see that community is abundant, so beloved. Yeah, this was very healing. I'm so grateful for this space. Thank you to interpreters. Thank you for my lovely, beautiful co-organizers. And thank you for everyone in attendance, our incredible guest speakers. So grateful. And yes, resources will continue to be posted on Ryan's, Kevin's pages, and you can also access resources about anti-speciesism at all times at Interspecies Liberation. We posted their Instagram on the chat. And wow, I thought I'd have more words, but I really am kind of speechless. Y'all took my words away today. I'm feeling so loved and so joyful. So thank you, and please keep your eye out for those resources. And have a beautiful day. Please take care of yourselves too.
Dre, you can go ahead and end the call for everyone.